Oh hey, did you guys know we have Gearist gear now? Check this out! Go buy one! Click this link right here on my face. Thanks so much. Let's get into the review. Hey there guys, Brandon here from Gearist. Today we're going to be taking a look at the Ultra TR2 from the North Face. Just as a lot of road shoes have different speeds or purposes assigned to them, so too do some trail shoes. Of course we all know that there are trail shoes out there that are generally meant to be beat up and handle a lot of rocky terrain or really smooth terrain, but finding something that's right in the middle, something that is really ready to rip off some solid fast miles on groomed trails, handle a little bit of technical terrain, but all doing that while in a super lightweight package, that's tricky because trail shoes, generally speaking, not a lightweight package. But the North Face, with this guy right here, the Ultra TR2, has really put something together that's based on a cross-country spike, is meant to rip off those fast miles and can still handle a lot of terrain with a good amount of grip. So the first thing we're going to look at is the outsole of this shoe. Now, if we're defining luggy by the number of lugs on a shoe, it doesn't get a whole lot luggier than this right here, with over 100 individual lugs on the bottom of this thing. However, when we're geeking out on trail shoes, a lot of the time what we're talking about isn't just the number of lugs, but it's often the size, the direction, the arrangement of those lugs, how deep they are, things like that. Things that are really going to define how well this is going to do on what type of terrain. In the case of the Ultra TR2, as you can see here, these lugs are actually fairly small but really densely packed. There are a couple of nice flex grooves running through there, and the lugs are right about 3 millimeters deep. Some are just a hair shallower, some are a hair deeper. It really depends on where you are in the arrangement of the shoe. On the one hand, this gives the Vibram rubber that sits on the bottom of this guy a lot of different places, a lot of different crags and things where to grab onto different rocks, different types of terrain, and really give you a great amount of traction. On the other hand, when you get to something that's a looser terrain or a muddy terrain or something like that, it doesn't really function as well, but that's not what this shoe is for. The outsole of the shoe is also where ground feel comes into play for the first time. As you can see, it's a relatively low stack height shoe. That amazing flexibility that I mentioned about those two flex grooves up front, but it also extends further to the back of the shoe even. There's a lot of flexibility in this, a lot of ground feel. Now, one could also say that by looking at this shoe is set up to be a hybrid shoe. It's no stretch to see that this could be a road shoe. You can see their relatively flat profile. And I myself have about 8 road miles on this shoe, and it actually performed really well. And durability wise, again, I've had this on some really rocky terrain, which I'm going to talk about in a second. It's held up extraordinarily well. The only wear that I can really see is right up here on the lateral forefoot rather, which is where I'm typically going to see that wear anyway, because it's generally where I land from here to here. So this is where I'm seeing that wear, but even then it's really minimal. I don't know if you can really get a good sense of that in the camera there, but very minimal wear, holding up extremely well. And in fact, one of the things, and we'll touch on this a little bit later, that I can see is this outsole potentially holding up beyond the life of the rest of the shoe, which is an interesting thing. Getting into the midsole now, I have to warn you right now that I'm about to use what is a dirty word to some, so cover your kids' ears. Continuing the dirty word minimalist nature of this shoe, you can see here by looking at the stack height that what the shoe really wants you to do is to feel everything underfoot. This is front and center of the focus of this shoe. And in the midsole, we see that up here as a dual density EVA foam that sits right here. Part of that is just typical good old EVA, and part of that is making up some of the proprietary cradle guide system that the North Face has in here, and that is basically to really keep this neutral. A lot of times we might hear something guide and think that it's meant to make it a more stability action. This is actually to keep it in that neutral zone. Something else that we see appear in the midsole or integrated to midsole is this right here. I don't know if you can really see it. This is their Pebax midsole cradle back here. Now this is a bit of a plastic cradle, and what it's meant to do is that if you are somebody who lands on your heel, which I generally do not, if you're somebody who lands on that heel, this is meant to start your foot off at the beginning of that gait cycle in a stable, neutral place, as opposed to leaving any lateral or medial instability or kind of wonkiness where you might land and then kind of roll a little bit, what have you, for early stage pronation or something like that. This is going to really get you lined up and ready to go through the rest of the gait cycle. If you're someone who lands like I do on more the midfoot or the forefoot, then what you're going to use this for is it's a really nice stable stable platform for when you're in that load phase, when the body is actually pushing that weight down into the ground. This is a nice and stable area which you're going to feel underfoot. Generally speaking, I really like a lot of ground feel. I like the way that it makes me feel connected to the ground. And this shoe right here, whether it's on a road, it's on a fire road or a path or well-groomed trail, or even big, rocky and rooty stuff, this does very well and keeps me very nicely connected to the ground. However, when it comes to smaller, more jagged rocks, it's needing a little bit more foot protection underneath. But again, I don't think that it's meant for that type of terrain. I took this up to Devil's Backbone in Loveland, Colorado, where the terrain is amazingly rocky at times, and it will just beat you up even in a well-protected shoe. And this just, I did 11 miles out there, I think, or 11 or 12 miles, and got really beat up in this. Between its relatively low stack height of 22 millimeters in the heel, 14 millimeters in the foot for a net drop of 8 millimeters, there's just not a lot of room in there for any other rock plate or protection or something like that. But again, I don't think that's what this is meant for. On the other hand, there are some shoe brands these days doing really amazing things with flexible rock plates that are very minimal, sit in that midsole, and get out of the way. So it would be cool to see something like that integrated into this shoe without adding really any weight at all, and with adding a little more underfoot protection. Now let's get into the upper right here, and this is one of the places where the most relatively lightweightness is going to come to this shoe. The main mesh on the Ultra TR2 is made from North Face ripstop tent fabric, which is an indication that they want to keep it really durable and solid no matter the terrain, but also saving a lot of weight on this guy. The mesh does a nice job of keeping out any kind of large debris or anything like that, or even more fine debris. You will find dust getting in there from time to time, but again, what shoe doesn't do that still has an amount of breathability? And speaking of breathability, it's actually quite breathable. Feels very nice. Good drainage. If you're going through a lot of water or something like that, there's plenty of places along the transition between the midsole and the upper there for water to drain out of the sides. It's not quite as breathable as something that I might expect from a lightweight upper like this, but it is still very breathable, and that's probably actually a good thing over the long haul because it's not going to sacrifice that durability by making it so lightweight and breathable that it just breaks down on you. On the interior of this guy, there are flash dry fibers embedded into the air mesh in here that are meant to keep the foot dry and very comfortable, eliminate hot spots and things like that. Now, I don't run sockless, especially in trail shoes, because I just have sensitive feet like that, and I don't like the feeling of that. But I will tell you that the times I have put this on just to walk around and stuff, it's very comfortable on the interior. The one possible area that might annoy some people, especially if you have a longer second toe, is a little transition right up here under the toe cap where there's just a stitch that might kind of poke into you, but that's only if you're really jamming into the front of the shoe. Also in the interior, right here on the medial side, you may be able to see it, that bit of dark material right up there. It actually kind of looks like an old school Saucony or Tree Torn logo. But what that is there's a little bit of a band of microfiber material right in that area that does a nice job of adding some medial stability and kind of making the upper feel a little more cohesive around the foot. Maintaining that, again, dirty word, coming minimal essence of this shoe, the support structure that we can see here, all these silver lines that are on the upper, plus a couple little blue lines right up here that kind of disappear into it a little bit. These are made from bonded TPU. They're very well attached to the shoe, and in places where it is necessary, they are reinforced with stitching. I am not opposed to this. You know, we talk about having simply bonded overlays all the time, but in a case like this, especially in a lightweight shoe where you want to make sure that things are going to stay together well, I am all about reinforcing those with a single stitch or something like that. Moving into the toe cap, which just does have a nice toe cap up here. It appears to be made from the same material as all this supporting around these sides, but it's probably doubly as thick. It's a decent toe cap. If you're going to kick something full on, like you're trying to kick a 60-yard field goal or something like that, you're probably going to feel it. But in general, it has done a nice job for me when I've kicked rocks and almost ate it all over the place, but it's a good toe cap. In the heel counter back here, there's really not much in the way of structure. It's very loose, maintaining the feel of the rest of the shoe, which is pretty much like just totally loose. There is a little bit of structure added by, again, this Pebax cradle that's back here right down at the bottom, and then a little bit of it, you can see this additional material that goes at the back, which is just going to allow some structure up kind of around the area of the Achilles insert. Regardless, when you get the foot in it from the internal side, it's very strong heel counter, though from the outside it maintains a lot of flexibility. The tongue of the shoe is probably one of the most minimal tongues that I've ever seen. It's simply this piece of what feels to be suede, I'm sure it's faux suede or microfiber or something like that, material that runs from the vamp down here all the way up, and then it is of course gusseted over on the sides there, which you may be able to see. It's super soft against the foot, very, very comfortable, does not slide, and there's a lace loop right here to keep it from sliding. And part of that not sliding I have to credit to the laces. These laces are actually really, really cool, and one of my favorite parts about this shoe, weirdly. You know, we're all used to those sausage link laces, which are kind of like big sections, not big sections, they're like a 1/4 inch sections that have fat and then narrow sections and things like this, and when you tie them, they don't come untied as much. In this guy, it's sort of kind of something like that. You're probably not going to be able to see. I'll try to find a picture for you, but this is kind of a miniature version of that. So in a given inch, you'll probably fit 9 or 10 of these little guys. So it really is a thin lace that's very lightweight and keeps itself tied. I never had any problems with this coming untied at all. As you know, one of my favorite areas to pick on is the collar and the amount of foam around there, but in this guy, there's very little foam at all. I love it. There's very little foam, maybe a little bit right up here at the top of the collar, and then on the back side of the heel counter, there's a thin layer of some additional foam on top of simply the outside material of the upper. Now, I would encourage you that if you're looking for more padding in that area, just hold on. Don't write this off just yet. Put a sock on. It's still very, very comfortable. I've never felt anything like hard or sharp or anything pushing into my foot or my ankle. It's very, very comfortable, regardless of the fact that it is thin cushioning, which kind of proves my point that it can be done and you don't need inches of foam back there. With regard to fit, in its description, North Face mentions that the Ultra TR2 is inspired by a cross-country spike, and whatever that conjures up to you, to me, it says that this is more of a racer and it's going to be a more snug fit. While I can definitely see the inspiration across the shoe from the upper down to the midsole down to the outsole, it actually fits a lot better than I would have expected out of something classified or qualified as being inspired by a cross-country spike. So it's a really interesting fit. The fit in the heel is awesome thanks to the extraordinarily flexible area back here. The heel counter just is all flexible. But I would encourage you, again, if you're somebody looking for a little more padding in that area, to try a sock, but just don't write it off right away because it is awesomely comfortable back there. Moving into the midfoot of the shoe, it's very comfortable. I had zero problems. I will say that on some really off-camber stuff, and especially when I was up at Devil's Backbone, even when it wasn't super rocky, but still very off-camber, basically where you're running like this or like this, because of the minimal nature of the upper, you might not feel as locked down, but again, that little bit of medial support right there goes a long way. But again, what is this shoe used for? This is a race-inspired shoe, so it is meant to go out and rip up some trails that aren't necessarily going to be as technical as some of the things that I tried in it. The forefoot is where the most racery type stuff comes up for me, and while yes, I would still like quite a bit more lateral forefoot area in the toe box up here, I found that there's a good amount of vertical wiggle room, no problems there really. There's just not really quite as much room as I might like for a little bit of splay, but I think that this is not a deal breaker, especially in a race-inspired shoe. Now, before we get into talking about the full-on ride, let's talk about how light this is, because I've said it's lightweight several times, but how lightweight is it? Well, a men's size 9, which if you don't know is typically what people base as their kind of barometer, comes in at 8.1 ounces, which is not super light for a road shoe, but for a trail shoe, especially a legit trail shoe, 8.1 ounces is a pretty solid weight, and in my men's size 11, it comes in at 8.8 ounces. But how does this thing ride? On one of my first runs, I got a chance to take this out on a really well-groomed trail that had a big rock here or there, something like that, but in general, the trail was just groomed single track. And on that trail, this shoe crushed. I felt fast, I felt like I could really corner very well, I was agile, I felt like the shoe was giving me a good amount of pop back, I was getting good response from it, great ground feel as I mentioned. So with that confidence from that buttery smooth trail, I took it out to Devil's Backbone to see what I could push the limits with. At Devil's Backbone, there are certainly parts of that trail which are really smooth and very nice and all that kind of stuff. However, there are large sections which are extraordinarily rocky, which even well-protected shoes would have a hard time with that. But in this, I really found myself wanting a rock plate. Again, I don't necessarily think that is what this is for. That's not the type of terrain this shoe is built for. But even with that, I will say that the outsole of this stuck to like everything. However, would I take it there again? Probably not, except for just on the smooth sections. I really feel like this is a shoe that if you're going to take it on a trail, you need to know what kind of trail you're getting on. Yes, you can push the limits and take it on some more rock stuff, especially if the rocks are larger, where you don't have things that are quite as jabby that are getting up in there. But again, if you know the trails around you, then you're going to be comfortable taking this where you need to. As I mentioned at the outset of this review, there are road shoes that are meant for very specific purposes, and there are likewise trail shoes that are meant for very specific purposes, and this is one one of those. This is meant for racing and going fast, speed work, what have you, on really well-groomed trails that maybe have some big rocks or things like that here and there. It's got excellent traction. It's just a really solid shoe, but it reaches its limits when you get to really jagged, rocky stuff or really rooty stuff like that. So just know what you're getting into with a shoe like this. It's really well built. I've had no problems with durability. It is a lightweight upper, so I've only put about 45 miles in this. If you're somebody who's putting 300, 400 miles on it, you might find a little bit of durability issue here and there. I don't know, but I can tell you that the quality and build of this thing is really well worth it, and it's worth contacting North Face if you ever had any problems with it. And what's the price tag on this guy? Well, you can check the links down in the description for some of the price ranges, but basically it starts right about $80 up to $115, depending on the size and things like that you want. But again, if you're interested in it, please check the buy links down below. That helps Gearist because we get a little kickback from the retailer, and it's the lowest price for you. Before we get into our question of the day, guys, don't forget to please subscribe to our channel and share it with your friends. That would mean a lot. Also, give this video a like and a favorite. Now, here's our question of the day for you. What type of trail, when you're running trail, what type of trail do you like to run on? Do you like that gnarly, ugly, rocky stuff? Really just technical terrain that's really steep or loose or what have you? Or do you like smooth, buffed out stuff where you can really rip off some miles? Let us know down in the comment section below. Once again, guys, thank you so much for spending a few minutes with us today and watching this review from Gearist. If you've got any questions, don't hesitate to email info@gearist.com or contact us on any of our social media outlets where we'd be happy to have a chat with you. Also, don't forget to visit gearist.com. Let us know what's up. Share all of our stuff with your friends. We would really appreciate it. And hashtag your pictures and tweets on Instagram and Twitter with hashtag I'm a Gearist. IMAGEARIST. Thank you guys so much, and we will see you next time.